This mini lesson teaches you the basic concepts of creating and animating 3D cameras, adding null objects, parenting cameras, and the power of mixing and matching both for smoother and organic animations. So inside Adobe After Effects, let's go ahead and set up our scene. The first I'm going to do is create a new composition. So I'm going to click on this create a new composition icon. And for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to use width 1280 by 720, or alternatively, you can just click on this preset drop down and choose one of these presets. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to click and drag the semi-done mosaic into the timeline panel. Now I'm going to also apply a stroke on this PNG image. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to the layer styles and add a stroke, which actually I'm going to change the color. So I'll open up the stroke settings here, and I'm going to choose white, and I'm going to up the size of the stroke to, let's say, 6. In addition, I'm going to select the type tool, and I'm going to click once, and I'm going to give it the proper name of the mosaic, which actually exists in Hagia Sophia. So that will be, let's say, Hagia Sophia. And then I'm going to center this. I'm going to use the align panel. That would be horizontal center alignment and vertical center alignment. And then I'm going to click and drag this, hold on the shift key as I do to size this up. Okay. Now in this one, the text, also I'm going to apply layer style, and I'm going to add a drop shadow, and I won't do anything to it, just the way it is. And then because we are working on 3D cameras, we need to turn those two layers into 3D layers. And the way you do it is you need to select the 3D layer switch, and here's the switch. Now if you don't see the switches here, you need to probably toggle on and off these switches. So you can press and you can toggle and see the other switches. In this case, I can see that, the 3D layer switch, so I'm going to click to activate it and do the same for the PNG. So both of these layers now are 3D. But here's the thing, with this active camera view, we can really see how these layers behaving. And what I mean is, click on this active camera and choose an orthographic view. In this case, I'm going to use the top orthographic view. And as you can see, both of these layers are on top of each other. In this case, because you're working on 3D space, you need to separate those in space. So I'm going to select the semi-done mosaic, and then I'm going to hover over this axis arrow, and where it says Z, when you get the indication of the Z axis here, just click and drag this and separate it into 3D space like so. Okay. All right. Now if you wish, you can go back to the active camera. And of course, last thing is, before we move on, we need to actually add a new camera. So I'm going to go to the layer panel here, the layer menu, and I'm going to choose a new camera. And for this tutorial here, we're going to be using actually a 2-node camera. Now, when you get the camera settings window here, you can select two types of camera. You have the 1-node camera, which is a camera that orients around itself, or we have the 2-node camera, which basically, with the 2-node camera, you get the camera itself and a point of interest that you can point it in different layers in orbit around those layers. Okay. For preset, I'm just going to go for 35 millimeters, and then I'm going to click OK. All right. And our scene is set up. I'm going to save that. And on the next one, we're going to look into how the camera tools work and how they behave. Adobe After Effects comes with several camera tools to help you work on 3D space, and all of these are located up in the toolbar, specifically right here. Starting with the Unified Camera tool, followed by the Orbit Camera tool, the Track XY Camera tool, and the Track Z Camera tool. But first, let's look into the Unified Camera tool. With this tool, you can use a 3-button mouse to activate any of the individual tools. For example, with the left mouse button, you will use the Orbit Camera tool. Control Z at Command C to undo this. With the right mouse button, you will get the Track Z camera tool. And lastly, using the middle mouse button will activate the Track XY camera tool. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and actually talk about these tools even in more detail. By the way, if you want to jump from camera tool to camera tool, as you can see here, a great shortcut is the letter C. So if you press that, it will jump from camera tool to camera tool. Now, before I continue, first let me actually lock these two layers so I don't accidentally select them. And then inside the camera here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press P for position to bring up the position parameter, and then Shift A to bring up the point of interest. In addition, from one view, I'm going to switch to two views so I can see what I do. And then I'm going to actually zoom out just a little bit here, because the camera tools behave different for the point of interest and the position. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that. Again, right now I am using the unified camera tool, so I'm going to press the letter C on my keyboard to go to jump to the next camera tool, and that will be the Orbit. So let's see how the Orbit camera tool behaves with the point of interest and the position. So I'm going to click and drag this around, and as you can see here on the timeline, only the position is changing and only the back of the camera is moving. Okay, now let's go ahead and reset that. Now here's a little trick here. First, you need to twirl this up and then down so you get the reset button. So let's go ahead and reset that. But what you can do is you can also isolate only these two parameters, the point of interest and the position. And the trick here is to hold down the Alt Shift or Option Shift on the Mac, click, 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 and now you only have the point of interest, position, and the reset button. All right. Okay, so we looked into the Orbit. Let's press the letter C to switch to the Track XY. Let's see how this behaves. With this tool, you're moving the camera and the point of interest left, right, up, down, and in the timeline, as I use the X and Y's camera tool, only the X and Y value is changing for both point of interest and the position, but not the Z value here. So I'm going to reset that again. I'm going to press C on my keyboard to jump to the next camera tool. That will be the Track Z camera tool. So let's do that, and also pay attention to the point of interest in the position. And as I do that, I'm only moving the back of the camera to go in and out, and I'm only changing the Z value. Okay, so let's reset that as well. And basically this is how the different camera tools behave in relation to the position and point of interest. Before we start animating our camera, let's go ahead and learn how to use the camera tools both in the orthographic views and the active camera. Camera tools operate differently depending which view you're working in. If you're using any of the camera tools in the active camera as indicated here or here, you're moving the actual camera and changing the values for both the position and the point of interest. So let's go ahead and bring one of the camera tools. I'm going to press C on my keyboard. And right now I have the Track Z. So if I click and drag this in and out, I'm actually changing the back of the camera and I'm changing the Z position here. Switch to another camera tool. Let's say we have the Orbit. I'm changing again the position, the back of the camera. If I use the XY, I'm changing both the point of interest and the position. Okay, let's go ahead and reset that. The story changes though when we're using the camera tools in one of the orthographic views. Here we are only changing the preview and not the actual camera as we do in the active camera. So before I demonstrate this to you, we need to optimize the orthographic views in this composition panel. An orthographic view refers to, let's click on that to activate that. It refers to the front, to the left, to the top, to the back, to the right, or the bottom view. The orthographic views show positions, layer positions in the composition, but they do not show perspective. So now the challenge here is to set the magnification ratio to 100 and still be able to fit the entire camera into the composition panel. Right now, as you can see, the magnification ratio I'm using is 25%. But the size of the camera is so small, especially the individual axis arrows are hard to select when, for example, you're using the selection tool. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is actually to leave the magnification ratio to 100% and then bring up the camera tools by pressing the C key. In this case, I'm going to start with the track Z, and I'm going to try to fit everything into the composition panel here. So I'm going to zoom out here kind of using the track Z. Then I'm going to hold down the space bar on my keyboard to pan up and down, left and right. I'm going to release the mouse, continue using the track Z camera tool. I'm going to switch to the XY like so, kind of position this the center, and then again the track Z to kind of zoom in. As you can see here now, I have the individual axis arrows quite visible, and using the selection tool will be quite easy to select. Alright, now what about the orbit camera tool? We use the other tool, we use the track Z and the XY camera tool, but we did not use the orbit. Now, the orbit camera tool will not work in any orthographic views because, as I mentioned before, an orthographic view does not have perspective. In this case, what we need to do is we use one of the custom views After Effects provides us. This view is actually great for be able to see your states in different angles. So let's say I'm going to use the custom view 1. Again, I'm going to use the track Z and then press again to position this. And now if you want, you can use the orbit camera tool. And if you notice here, still I'm not changing any of the point of interest or the position. In other words, this is how the camera tools work in different views, whether it's the active camera view, the orthographic camera view, or the custom views After Effects provides us. So we talked about how the camera tools work in different views inside After Effects, and now we are going to actually start animating our camera. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to use the selection tool, and I'm going to drag any of the axis arrows and show you how the camera actually behaves. So for example, I'm going to start with the X, and notice that both the point of interest over here and the position is changing. Same thing with the Y-axis arrow, and the same thing with the Z position. Okay, I'm going to reset that. This is not what we're looking for. What you're looking for is to actually animate a camera that orbits around the scene. And this cannot happen with the point of interest animating at the same time. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are only in the position here, and you need to hold down the Control key or the Command key on the Mac. And now you can start moving any of the axis arrows. As you can see, only the back of the camera is changing and the position value. Same thing with the Y, and the same thing with the Z. Okay, so I'm going to reset that, And let's go ahead and create our first animation. I'm going to create a first keyframe by clicking the stopwatch. I'm going to hold down the Control key or the Command key on the Mac. And let's set something here. The Y is going to the Z, kind of bring it in. Okay, let's go after, let's say, 3 seconds here. And then again, hold down the Control key or the Command key on the Mac. Something like that. And I'm using the space bar to pan up and down, left and right. Let's bring that in on the Z, like so. Okay, so let's see what we got. Okay, we have a nice animation here. Not bad. But here's the problem. I'm looking at this custom view 1 and I'm seeing a motion path, a straight motion path. Let's change the custom view 1 to, let's say, the top custom view. Again, another motion path here, a straight motion path. But if you look at the preview animation here, what we see here is we see a straight motion path getting closer to the 2 layers in the middle of the animation, as well as the camera swinging at the back in a nice curve. But the question is, where is the curve? There is no curve. It's just a straight motion path. So as you can see, this is quite deceiving. So what we need to do is actually pull out those 2 handles for each keyframe in order to get the motion what hypothetically we are seeing. Now, if I play this, we're going to get a different animation here. You see? So that's actually not something that he opted doing inside After Effects, having motion paths sticking out in different directions with handles and so on. Instead, you want to create a camera that perfectly orbits around your scene. Creating a camera that perfectly orbits a scene, it's actually quite simple. Besides creating a camera, we will also create a null object in which we will parent the camera to it. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to twirl this up on the camera 1 and also make the camera 1 invisible. And then I'm going to go to the layer menu, new. I'm going to create a new camera. I'm going to use the same preset, which is a 35mm, and the type will be a 2-node camera. Click OK. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going back to the layer menu, new, and we're going to create a new null object. Now, we need to parent camera 2 to the null 1, and that's actually quite easy. First, you need to have this parent column available to you, and the shortcut for this is Shift F4, like so. Shift F4. Alright, so there are a couple of ways you can do this. You can either click and drag this pick whip to the null 1, or you can just click on this drop-down menu and parent camera 2 to the null 1, like so. Now, because we are working on 3D space, we also need to turn on the 3D switch for the null object, like so. Okay, so let's open up the transformations here. And all I want to do is actually I want to focus on the Y rotation. So I'm going to press the R key on my keyboard. Now I get all these rotations. And then I'm going to focus only on the Y rotation. So Alt Shift, Option Shift to get only the Y rotation here. So click, click, and click. And let's go back to the very beginning. Let's click on the stopwatch like so to create our first keyframe. Let's change the rotation, the degrees here to say something like that. Let's move, let's say, after like 3 seconds or so. And now let's move to the other direction, like so. Okay, so let's play this animation. And that looks very nice. It's nice and smooth. Let's do this one more time. like so. And as you can see here, we don't have any motion path sticking out in any kind of directions. Instead, we have a smooth animation that perfectly orbits those two layers. Now that we've learned how to create a null object and parent a camera to it, we can go ahead and take this even further by mixing and matching between the null and the camera. But before I do that, let me show you a quick way how to create a null object and parent that to a camera. So just for a second, I'm going to make those invisible. I'm going to go back to the layer menu and create a new camera. Click OK. And then instead of creating a new null object, go back to the layer menu, go all the way down to this camera, and then choose Create Orbit Null. And here we got three things happening. After Effects went ahead and create a null object. It turned on the 3D switch for that null object, and then it parented camera 3 to the null 2. So you want to keep that in mind. Next time you want to do the same. So I'm just going to revert this back and then continue. And this time I'm going to animate camera 2. And so I'm going to go back to the first keyframe. I'm going to click on the stopwatch on the position. And let's see, I'm going to, let's say, bring this in a bit. Sync this to the next keyframe, like so. And then kind of do it the opposite. Okay, let's place this. And okay, we have a nice animation here. Okay, what else can we do? Well, here's what we can do. We can go ahead and create a new null object. Layer, new null. And this time, I'm going to parent null 1 to null 2. So again, you can click and drag this pick whip of null 1 and drag this to the null 2. And now null 1 is parented to the null 2. And I'm going to twirl this down. And this time, again, I'm in the first keyframe. I'm going to make this, again, a 3D layer. So turn on the 3D switch for null 2. And then on the position again, on the top view here, I'm going to change the top view to, let's say, the custom view 1. On null 2, I'm going to use the Y arrow axis here and move it this way. And then sync the next keyframe to the frame below, like so. Again, take the Y-axis arrow here and kind of do the opposite, like so. And then go back to the very beginning. And for the X rotation, I'm just going to do that. Perfect. So as you can see, we have a very nice, smooth, organic animation by just mixing and matching nulls and cameras. Combining null objects with camera is an extremely powerful tool inside After Effects. I would suggest to kind of plan this ahead and think about the motion you would like to have. Then use similar techniques that would yield smooth and organic animations for any of your projects. This concludes this tutorial, and thank you for watching.